Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'll show you how to make a bustier blouse or dress with keyhole neckline. As you can see, this is very beautiful. So I'll be using this pattern paper to draft out my pattern first. The first thing I want to do is to go ahead and mark out my shoulder line by placing my ruler on the edge like this with about half an inch measurement downwards, and there we have our neck shoulder line. On that shoulder line, I'm going to mark my shoulder measurement divided by 2, and I'm going to mark my neck width for the front, which is 3 inches. I mean the neck depth and the neck width of 3 inches. So I did 3 by 3 inches for the neck width and the neck depth. Okay, and I'm going to connect that with my ruler, and on that point where I mark the shoulders measurement, I'm going to come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope, and I'll connect that point to the neck width I marked earlier on. The next measurement we'll mark is to take our armhole measurement divided by 2. My armhole round divided by 2 is 7 inches, so I marked it from that line, and I'm going to mark it there again so I can get a straight line. So now you're going to connect that, but before you do, mark your shoulder measurements on that bust line so you can get a straight line. So after doing that, I'll just connect my points. So from the shoulder measurement, I'm going to mark my bust point line, which is 10 inches, my under bust measurement 13 inches, and my waistline, which is 16 inches. You're going to mark that again so you can get a straight line. After that, just connect with your straight ruler just the way I'm doing it here. So now we have the bust line, bust point line, on the bust, and the waistline. The bust line can also be called the chest line, so yeah, I have it there. On the bust point line, I'm going to mark my bust span measurement divided by 2. My bust span is 7 inches divided by 2 is 3.5. So I marked 3.5 on the bust point line, on the bust line, and on the waistline. Okay. And on the bust point line, I mark 1 inch downwards, and I'm going to connect from that 1 inch downwards down to the waistline, just the way I did it here. So on the inner part, the center front, I'm going to mark half an inch on the dart line. Now we are taking our dart, okay, and on the side I'm going to mark 1.5 inches. So you see what I did here, I'm going to connect the points. On this point I marked half an inch, on this other side I marked 1.5 inches. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to take the middle of my shoulder slope measurement. I'm going to use my measuring tape to mark that, and I'm going to note the midpoint. Okay, so on that point I'm going to connect straight to the bust point line. I'll first of all connect to the bust line, and I'm going to connect it to the bust point line, that point where we came down by 1 inch. So you can see the lines are joined together now, and I'm going to curve that intake I took right to the bust point with my curved ruler, just like this. And I'm going to flip my curved ruler, and I'm going to take that intake for the other side. So I just have this curve to meet the 1 inch that I marked downwards. Okay, not to the bust point line, to the 1 inch that I marked. So if you want your bustier to cover, you're going to take 1 inch upwards. Just see the way mine fits. So from the bust line I marked 1 inch upwards, okay, so that it will be covered a little bit. I don't want it to open. So from that 1 inch I'm going to, okay, before then I'm going to mark my front armhole, and I'm going to mark half an inch from the midpoint, and I'm going to curve it out. You know how we usually take our front armhole, mark the middle, go inward by half an inch, and curve it out. So this is my front armhole, and now I can take in the dart for the upper part. On this other side I'm going to mark 1 inch. Okay, the point towards the armhole, I'm going to mark 1 inch, I mean half an inch, and on the other side I marked 1 inch. You can see what I did here. So on the side towards the center I marked 1 inch, and on the side towards the armhole I marked half an inch for the dart, and I'm just going to curve that down to the bust point line. So now we have our dart intake already. You're going to decide how you want the sweetheart neckline to be. For mine, I want it to stop at the bust line. So I'm going to use my curve ruler to find a curve from the dart point to the bust line. So you can decide to take yours lower than the bust line or even above the bust line. So it just depends on what you want for yours, okay? But this is how I want mine to be on the bust line. Okay, I don't want it to open. You can go half an inch under the below the bust line if you want, okay? So after that, I took my bust measurement divided by 4 on the bust line, and I'm just going to measure the dart intake which I have there, and I added 1.5 inches for seam allowance, okay? And I'm just going to curve that into the armhole that we have already, okay? So this is now our new measurement. On the waistline, I'm going to mark my waist measurement divided by 4, and I'm going to measure the dart intake, which is 1.2 inches. I took in 2 inches for the dart, I added that back, and I added 1.5 inches for seam allowance, okay? So now the dart intake, by the time we are going to take this, we're cutting this part off, okay? We're cutting those parts off. So, and we added it on the side so that we won't be short of fabric. So for the neckline, I decided to take mine up a little bit. So you see how I placed my curved ruler again, not the way I placed it before, because I realized that if I cut it there it would be too open, so I decided to take it up a little bit, okay? So after that, I'm going to connect the side down to the armhole. Just with my curved ruler, curve it into the armhole just like this. If you don't get it, just do what I'm doing. It's very, very easy. So now we are going to cut this pattern out, and after that we're going to cut out the yoke. So I decided to take my time to cut this. So you see, at this point you really need to pay attention to how I'm cutting it, so you don't cut out the parts that you're not supposed to cut out, okay? So just follow the way I'm cutting it like this, okay? So now I'm going to take out the dart. I told you we won't be needing that part anymore, which is why we added it to the sides, okay? So just carefully follow the way I'm cutting this pattern out. This part is also very, very important, okay? So now I'm going to cut out the neckline. So here we have our front panels ready. We have the center front, the side, and the yoke. So you can even decide to use the yoke like, yes, the yoke like this, but because we are doing a keyhole neckline, we are going to modify this later, okay? So I have the center front, the side, and the yoke. You can decide to use it. This is what I'm explaining. You can decide to cut it like this and use it for your dress, but because we are doing a keyhole, we are going to modify the yoke very soon so you can get your keyhole. So from the neckline, I mark 3.5 inches downwards. So this is how you get your keyhole neckline. So you need to pay very close attention to this. So I mark 3.5 inches from the neckline, and I'm going to use my curved ruler, place it on that 3.5 inches and curve it down to this point like this. So at this point now, I have the point where I want the keyhole to stop. So this is totally optional. It depends on how you want it. You can just take out a little bit in the middle. You can just curve it to the side. It just depends on what you want. So I just cut out this part, and this is what we have now for the yoke. I'm going to place it together so you see how we now have an opening in the middle of the blouse, okay? So now let's cut out the back panel. So this is the pattern paper I'll use for the back. I've marked out 1 inch for the zipper allowance, and I marked the shoulder line, chest line, bust point on the bust and the waistline. On the bust point line, I'll just mark my bust span divided by 2, which is 3.5, and I'll connect the points together with my straight ruler. And on the under bust, I took half an inch on each side, the same on the waistline. Just curve it to the bust points just like this. And on the shoulder line, I'm going to measure shoulder measurement divided by 2, and I mark that on the chest line as well, and I'll connect the points. Then I'm going to mark 1 inch for the shoulder slope, and I'm going to mark 3 inches for the neck width and 1 inch for the neck depth. And I'm going to curve out the shoulder slope and my neck line just like this. And I'm going to extend the neckline to the zipper allowance. On the chest line, I'm going to mark my bust measurement divided by 4, and after that I'll just cover the back armhole. You see the difference between the front and the back armhole. On my waistline, I mark my waist measurement divided by 2. By 4. I added the dart intake and I curved out with my seam allowance. So I'll just stretch this to the zipper allowance, and the back panel is done. So now, in case you want your back to also have a yoke, you're going to place your curved ruler like so, anyhow you want the shape to be, and you're going to curve it out. For instance, if I wanted a yoke, this is what I would have done for mine. But for this dress, I do not want the back to have a yoke, but I'm just showing you in case you want yours to have yoke. So that point would have become the yoke. You can mark it straight from the chest line. You can decide however you want. You can curve it, you can do it straight, okay? But I do not want yoke, so I'm just going to cut this out straight. If you want the yoke, it's on that point where you have the yoke that you cut as well, okay? So now I'm going to show you how you can take in your, to avoid zip budge. On the waistline, I marked in one half an inch, okay, and I slanted it to the neckline. And at that point, we're going to cut this part off. We do not need this part, so we can have our zip line nice and flat at the back, okay? So I'm just going to curve that out. So this is what we have for the back panel. So now I'm going to be using this fabric for the dress. I'll use this for the main dress, and I'll use this for the yoke and the sleeve, as you have already seen in the beginning of this video. So I placed my pattern on the fabric and I cut it out. Okay, we have the yoke. I cut 2 for that, and I have the center, the side, I cut 2, and I also cut out lining piece for all of them. Okay, so I'm going to open it up and show you what I have. For the side, I have 2, one for each side, and I also have 2 lining piece, okay? For the center front, I cut on folds just the way I instructed, okay, and I also cut out my lining piece. And for the yoke, okay, these are the two front panel for the center and the 2 sides, okay? So the yoke, I cut out 2 as well with the same material. I didn't use a lining piece for this. I used the same doll face satin to cut out for the inner one and the outer one, exactly the same, okay? So now you can stitch on it and turn it inside out. For the back as well, I cut out 2 pieces for the back and 2 pieces for the lining, okay? So here I have them. I'm going to use the pattern to notch the zipper part, so that when I'm cutting or when I'm sewing, I just know where my zipper is. So I just notch the zipper part, and this is what I have: 2 pieces for the back and 2 pieces for the lining, okay? So right here are the front pieces. I have the center and the 2 sides. I ironed an interfacing to it. What I use is an ST. So I gummed an ST to the front and also to the lining piece. So you're going to go ahead and gum your ST to all your pieces for the front and for the back as well. So for the back, I also gummed the ST to it just like this. What I did was to cut out an interfacing for the front panel, okay? Exactly the same for the center piece, and for the side I cut out just the way you see it here. I'm going to explain better. So for the lower part, I cut out the interfacing 3 inches on the lower part, and I left that part open, okay? I did not add interfacing to that side. So that's what you want to do for the two sides, okay? So I gum the interfacing to it. This is also known as a padded. Yes, in Nigeria we call it padded. So I gummed it to the front panels, and this is what I have. From the lower part, I'm going to make sure they match, and I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and stitch the two parts together. And I'm going to also stitch this side to it like this. So we're just going to couple the center and the front part of it. For the lining piece as well, I did the same thing. I'm just going to stitch it. I did not cut out a padded for the lining piece. As you can see, I just used ST. So for the yoke, I'm just going to stitch on the lower part and on the neckline, and I'm going to turn it out from the side. After stitching on the bustier part, this is what I have from the front. I gave it a notch and I ironed it out with the extra one. I opened it up and I ironed it very well. So you can see what I have. So for the yoke, this is what I have after stitching on it and turning it out and then giving it a good press. So this is what I have for the lining piece as well. So next we're going to couple this together. I'm going to place the yoke the way I want it towards the fabric like this, and I marked out the center, making sure that the center of the yoke matches the center of the bustier, and I'm going to place it from the center like this. I'm going to measure from the center. I mark 7 inches. On the point where I have the 7 inches, I just placed my yoke there, and I'm going to do the same for the side. This is to make sure you have an accurate measurement. Your yoke is not looking bent or somehow after you must have attached it. Okay, so next I'm going to place the lining like this, and I'm going to pin it on the center. Okay, and I'm going to take this to the sewing machine. You can go ahead and pin yours round, especially if you are a beginner. Make sure you pin it so it doesn't move before you take it to the sewing machine. So I'm going to stitch all around the neckline, the sides, and the lower part, and then I will leave a small part where I will use to turn this inside out. Okay, right. So after doing that, this is what I have for mine. You can see that this is very beautiful. Okay, you can see what I have for mine. Very beautiful from the inside. Look how clean and neat it is. Okay, and that is what I have for the front. So this dress is going to have a skirt part. As you can see, it's already a dress. You saw it in the beginning. So I'm going to add the pieces together. I'm going to couple the pieces together. So the back, you see that I stitched in the dart as you already saw, and I turned out the neckline. So this is the skirt pattern of the dress. This is the lower part. See how neat it looks from the inside for the front, and here I have the two back pieces. So I'm just going to couple these pieces together because the major focus of this dress is to show you how to make a keyhole neckline, which I have done, and I hope you learned something in this video. So this is basically it. I'm going to couple this, and that's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye.